Hello and welcome. Today we are diving into one of the most vital topics for IGCSE Environmental Management, water. It's the absolute lifeblood of our planet, but, managing it is incredibly complex.
It really is. And we're not just going to list off a bunch of facts for you. We're going to get into the big debates. Are dams the perfect solution? How do we balance what we need with what the environment needs? Let's get right into it.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to follow the syllabus structure, just to make revision that much easier for you. We'll start with the basics, where water is actually found. Then we'll look at our demand for it, the super controversial role of dams, the huge issue of pollution, its link to disease, and finally, how we can actually manage it all.
First up, the absolute fundamentals. Before we can even think about managing water, we've got to understand where it is and how it moves around the planet.
So take a look at this. This slide shows a really staggering imbalance. A massive 97% of all water on Earth is saline. That's salty ocean water. It leaves just a tiny 3% as freshwater.
Okay, hang on a second. Just because it's called freshwater doesn't mean we can actually use it, right? Is all of that 3% even accessible to us?
And that is the crucial question. As you can see from this chart, of that small 3%, almost 70% is completely locked away as ice in glaciers and ice caps. Another 30% is groundwater, which, let's be honest, can be really difficult and expensive to get to. So what you're saying is, we're left with just 0.3% as surface water. The stuff in lakes, swamps, and rivers. That's the water we can actually get to easily. And that is a shockingly small fraction of the total. It really puts the whole challenge of water management into perspective, doesn't it?
Exactly. And this tiny fraction is always on the move, thanks to what we call the hydrologic cycle, or the water cycle. Heat from the sun causes evaporation from oceans and lakes, and also transpiration from plants. This water vapor rises up, it cools, and it undergoes condensation to form clouds. And eventually this leads to precipitation, rain, snow, or hail, which brings the water right back down to the Earth's surface.
And hey, here's a massive exam tip for you. Do not get these two terms mixed up. Interception is when rain gets caught by leaves and branches on a tree. It never even touches the ground. Infiltration, on the other hand, is when that water actually makes it to the surface and soaks down into the soil. Knowing that difference is absolutely crucial for a good grade.
So we know where the water is and how it moves, but how do we actually use it? In this next section, we're going to explore our seemingly unquenchable thirst for water and, well, all the problems that creates.
Our demand for water really falls into three main buckets. Domestically for things like drinking, cooking, and sanitation. Industrially for processes like cooling down machinery or manufacturing products. And the biggest user of all, agriculture, which needs a ton of water for irrigating crops.
And it's this incredibly high demand that leads to conflict over water. Just think about the Nile River. You've got multiple countries like Ethiopia and Egypt that completely depend on that one single source. So when one country decides to build a dam upstream, it directly impacts the water available to everyone downstream. And that, of course, creates some serious political tension.
This all leads to two really distinct types of water scarcity. First, there's physical scarcity. This is what you probably think of. There just isn't enough water in a region to meet demand. Simple as that. But there's also economic scarcity. This is where fresh water is available, but a country just doesn't have the money or the infrastructure, the pipes, the pumps, the treatment plants to get it to the people who need it.
And this is a perfect example of why you often see better water access in urban areas. Cities tend to be wealthier, and because the population is so dense, it's actually cheaper to build the pipes. Plus, people in cities can put more political pressure on their leaders to invest in water infrastructure compared to more scattered rural populations.
Which brings us to one of the biggest and maybe most debated solutions to water scarcity, multipurpose dams. So, are they these amazing engineering marvels that provide water and energy for millions, or are they, in fact, environmental disasters? Let's break it down.
Okay, so a multi-purpose dam is basically a giant wall built across a river. Pretty simple. It blocks the flow, and that creates a huge artificial lake behind it called a reservoir. This stored water can then be released in a really controlled way, spinning a turbine to generate electric hydroelectricity and providing a reliable water supply for farming and for cities.
So a huge plus is the energy. Dams provide renewable hydroelectric power, which cuts down on our need for fossil fuels.
But that comes at a huge social cost. To create that reservoir, you have to flood enormous areas of land, and that often means forcing thousands of people out of their homes and communities.
That's true, but they also provide a year-round reliable water supply for irrigation, and that's a massive boost for food security.
But again, you're totally disrupting the natural ecosystem. The original river habitat is gone, completely destroyed, and the dam itself physically blocks fish from migrating. That can devastate local fishing economies. It is never a simple choice.
So managing the quantity of water is one thing, but what about its quality? Let's move on to the really critical issue of water pollution. Water pollution really comes from four main sources. You've got untreated sewage from our homes, you've got domestic waste like detergents, then there are industrial processes which can release toxic chemicals and heavy metals, and finally agricultural practices where all the excess fertilizers and pesticides just wash off the fields and straight into our rivers.
And let's make this real for a second. Industrial waste isn't just a term in a textbook. It's mercury from a factory that's poisoning a river. And agricultural runoff isn't just fertilizer. It's the reason that thick green algae is choking your local lake.
And sometimes the pollution actually starts in the air. As this diagram shows, factories and cars release gases like sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides. These gases react with water droplets up in the atmosphere to form sulfuric and nitric acids, which then fall back down to Earth as acid rain.
And the impact is just devastating. Acid rain makes lakes and soil way more acidic, which can kill fish and damage entire forests. It literally eats away at limestone buildings and statues. And crucially, it can leach toxic heavy metals like aluminum out of the soil and into the water supply, poisoning the entire food web from the bottom up.
Another major impact of pollution is something called eutrophication, and it's a really devastating chain reaction. It all starts when fertilizers from farms run off into a lake. These nutrients cause a massive explosion of algae growth. We call it an algal bloom. Then, when all that algae dies, bacteria move in to decompose it, and in the process they use up all the oxygen in the water. This lack of oxygen creates a dead zone, where fish and other aquatic life literally suffocate and die.
And all of this leads us directly to the human cost of poor water management. See, contaminated water isn't just an environmental problem, it is a major public health crisis.
Okay, for your exam, you absolutely need to know two key types of water-related diseases. First, water-borne diseases, like cholera. These are spread by drinking water that's been contaminated with pathogens. Second, water-bred diseases, like malaria. These are spread by vectors, like mosquitoes, that need water to complete their life cycle.
Let's take a closer look at malaria. The diagram shows how an infected Anopheles mosquito bites a person, transmitting the parasite. That parasite then multiplies in the person's liver and blood. Then, an uninfected mosquito comes along, bites that person, picks up the parasite, and can then fly off and spread it to someone else. The mosquito is the vector, the thing that connects the disease from one person to the next.
And understanding that life cycle is absolutely key to controlling the disease. Since we know mosquitoes breed in stagnant, still water, one of the best strategies is just to drain those areas. We can also use simple things like mosquito nets to prevent bites, we can spray insecticides, or even introduce fish that love to eat mosquito larvae. It's a multi-pronged attack, and it's all based on the science of the disease.
So, we've seen the problems. Now for the final and I think most important part, the solutions. How do we manage all this pollution and treat our water to make it safe?
One of the most important processes is sewage treatment. First, screening just removes any large objects. Then, in primary treatment, the wastewater sits in a big tank, and the solid organic matter settles to the bottom as sludge. Next, in secondary treatment, oxygen is bubbled through the water to encourage helpful bacteria to break down all the remaining waste. And finally, in tertiary treatments, the water is filtered and disinfected with chlorine before it's released safely back into a river. So, as we've seen, it's all connected. Where water is found on the planet dictates who can get to it. Our growing demand for that water leads to these massive engineering projects like dams, and each one has its own complex consequences. And finally, the way we use and dispose of water ends up polluting the very resource we depend on, which creates these devastating health crises.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to really think about. In a world that's facing increasing pressure on its water resources from growing populations and a changing climate, what do you think is the single most critical action we need to take? Is it about building new technology? Is it about focusing on what we can do as individuals to conserve? Or is it all about implementing stronger government policy? That's the kind of complex question you need to be ready to tackle. Thanks for joining.